The following story is based on the long-running Hermitcraft server. While this is the first book in the series, it picks up on Season 7 of the Minecraft server itself. I selected Season 7 because that's where I first started watching the Hermit Grian. The server itself had no pre-planned storyline, at least not until Season 8, but that's the next book's problem. Any semblance of story is taken much less seriously by the Hermits than by this book, such as the mayoral election campaign. The true point of the server is just to watch a bunch of friends hang out, have fun, and play pranks on each other. This story attempts to follow that format while adding a more serious plot sprinkled in between the shenanigans. The characters of Boss Beth and Nightlight are not real hermits. They were created by me to allow for more freedom, as everyone else mentioned in the book is a real person. Thank you for reading. Please enjoy. The Hermitcraft Story, Mr. Mayor. Chapter 1. Pesky Bird. Grian. Grian took a breath of fresh air. The sky above him was a perfect crystal blue without a cloud in sight. The ocean around him beat the beach that he lounged on so casually. Grian was in nature, one of his favorite places to be. He took out a loaf of bread that he stole from a nearby village. The locals wouldn't miss it. Their security automatons wouldn't even attack you if you stole their stuff. They would only attack hostile creatures like zombies and creepers. Just as he was about to take a bite out of his hard-earned snack, a parrot swooped down in front of him and snatched the bread from his hands. "Hey!" Grian screamed. "Hey!" the parrot repeated mockingly. Grian got up in a huff, upset that his moment in nature was ruined by such a pesky bird. He chased the parrot into the jungle, jumping over fallen logs and ducking under odd tree branches. Grian knew he needed a plan. He couldn't just kill this bird. He needed to convince it to drop the bread without it making any noise and calling every hostile creature in the area toward them. Thinking fast, he reached into his pockets to get a grasp on what he had. A feather, a piece of flint, and 3 seeds. Yes, the seeds! Grian got an idea. The parrot landed on a broken log, thinking it was safe. Grian hid himself behind a nearby bush. He made a few rustling noises as he threw the seeds from his pocket next to the bird. The parrot chirped curiously before letting the bread fall out of sight as it began to peck up the seeds. Taking his chance, Grian ran out from behind the bush and snatched his bread back. "Ha!" Grian proclaimed excitedly. The parrot simply looked up at him in confusion. Grian let out a sigh before breaking off a piece of his bread and placing it on the log in front of the parrot. The parrot let out an excited chirp as it hungrily devoured the bread. It then flew up into the air and landed on Grian's shoulder. "Pesky bird," Grian muttered under his breath as he gently scratched the parrot on the head. Grian then took his own bite out of his loaf of bread. He walked over to a nearby small waterfall. He cupped his hands and took a drink out of the river flowing from the bottom of it. His scruffy blonde hair had become even more of a mess since the start of his journey. His red jumper was covered in filth, and he noticed a small hole starting to form in his black pants. Grian was lost in the jungle, and he knew it. He could probably follow the sun and get back to the beach, continue enjoying the waves, but his friends would be expecting him. Scar, Impulse, X, Mumbo, they would all be waiting to see him. Grian wondered what he would construct this time. He built a massive white tower last time, but it was too big, too much space to fill. He knew he needed to be smarter than that. Maybe he could build in the jungle. He would need a clear spot first. There would be lots of shrubbery to clear. Wait, last time? Was there a last time? How did he get here this time? How long ago was last time? Where was he? What was he doing before the beach? An arrow whizzed past Grian's head, breaking his deep spiral. He whirled around to see a skeleton standing behind him. The skeletons. One of this world's many dangers. Its eyes were hollow, leaving only dark sockets to command the sight of the ancient creature. Their long, spindly fingers held a crumbling bow and a seemingly endless supply of arrows. Grian checked the sky. It was still daylight. This creature should be burning. Then Grian looked a little lower and saw a series of branches coming up from a tree, casting the skeleton in the sanctuary of shadow. Grian panicked. He had no weapons and a bird to protect. On top of that, he knew that the skeleton would be smarter than its zombie counterpart. They wouldn't just walk into the sunlight to chase him. He could try and run, but if he turned his back, he'd be dead for sure. Skeletons have incredible aim. He could try and rush it, but without any way to defend himself, it would only take 2 shots to kill him. The skeleton's bones rattled as it reloaded its bow and began to step forward. Grian dove behind a tree as it fired another arrow at him. The arrow narrowly missed him and got itself lodged in the tree. Grian needed to think fast. The skeleton was maneuvering to get a clear line of sight to him. Grian checked his pockets again. A feather, a flint, and what's this? Grian found something deep in his pocket that he had forgotten about and picked up early on, a piece of string. He looked around, and sure enough, there was a bamboo stalk not 3 feet in front of him. He quickly kicked the bottom of the bamboo stalk, causing it to topple over towards the skeleton. The skeleton narrowly dodged the falling stalk, only serving to make it angrier as it reloaded its bow. Grian frantically ripped out the bottom of the stalk and curved it as he tried to string between the 2 ends. He then tied together his flint, his feather, and another piece of bamboo to make an arrow. The skeleton prepared to fire, but Grian took his shot first, and it landed between the creature's empty eye sockets.
The skull of the monster shattered to pieces as its once again lifeless body fell to the floor,
never to move again. Green walked over to his vanquished foe and began to gather its bones. He would grind them up to make bone meal later. This was one of many hazards of building in the jungle. Green would just have to set up a perimeter and be more careful in the future. After all, he had a pesky bird to take care of, who had stayed close and on his shoulder this whole time. Good times with Scar. Scar was always a goof. He was a fantastic builder, but a poor survivalist. He began sketching out ideas in his head for what his house would look like as he wandered through the jungle. He could live in a normal house with 4 walls and a pointed roof, but where would be the fun and whimsy in that? No. Scar's wizard rose flapped against the wind, demanding something more fantastical with each snap against his calves. A snail. Yes! Scar would build a massive snail named Larry, and he would live in the shell. That would be a fitting starter house for a wizard such as himself, and he would give the snail a mustache made out of diamond blocks. But the question remained of where. Where would he build such a house? Just as Scar began to ponder the possibilities, a perfect spot emerged, a small clearing at the edge of a massive shallow lake. Scar stood and admired the scenery. This would be the perfect spot to build a starter house. He quickly chopped down a tree and fashioned himself a chest, where he promptly dumped all of the materials he had gathered up on his adventure so far. 8 jungle logs, 3 oak planks, 2 wheat seeds, a feather, and much more trash than treasure. Either way, Scar realized he had enough iron and stone to make himself a basic set of tools and then got right to work. The hermits had unnaturally deep pockets without any wealth. They could hold all manner of building materials and tools without ever breaking a sweat. No one knew why the seams of their pants didn't rip apart or how they could store massive mounds of dirt in such a small space, but it was useful, so no one questioned it. Just as Scar finished organizing his chest and deciding what he would need to build his dream snail, a trident flew past his head. Scar looked to the water, only to see a group of drowned emerging from the lake. The drowned were the terrors of the deep ocean. Wet and torn clothes clung to their bodies as they emerged from the water. Their black and empty mouths hung open as they staggered closer. Their glowing white eyes pierced the dusk sky. With each step they made another one of their horrible gurgling noises, sounding as if their lungs were filled to the brim with water. There were 3 in the group, 2 normal and 1 with a trident. The trident drowned were the worst of them all because their tridents could hurt. Their ancient weapons had barbed tips which made it harder to pull out if they ever managed to stick you. But that didn't stop the enchantment on the trident from automatically ripping itself out of your flesh and flying back to the hands of its owner. Right on cue, the trident flew again past Scar's head, into the moldy and rotting hands of the drowned who originally threw it. Scar had been doing this for a long time, and he never knew the drowned to come out of the water on their own before. They would only attack you if you entered the water, allowing them to sense you. Although being wrong was not a new concept to Scar. The trident drowned gurgled one more time before winding up to throw the trident again. Scar panicked. He had no weapons and no armor. He had no way to defend himself. Plus, he had never sat down to bed, and if he died here, he would be sent all the way back to the start. He couldn't let that happen. Not after he had come so far and found the perfect spot. Scar realized that the drowned weren't burning despite them being out of the water. He looked up. Sure enough, it was dusk. He wouldn't be getting any help from the sun. He had to think on his feet. It was then he got an idea. He would catch the trident. The trident drowned threw his weapon a second time. Scar held up his hands in an attempt to catch it, but it slipped through his fingers, and the blades landed directly in his heart.
Scar cried out in pain.
He had forgotten how much these attacks hurt without any armor on. He knew another hit like that would finish him off for good. Sure enough, the trident drowned held out his hand and summoned the trident back to it, tearing Scar's flesh as it left his body. Scar was resigned to his fate. He was doomed and was about to lose everything. The 2 other drowned approached him on either side and held his wrists. Now Scar was certain this was new behavior, but there was no time to question it. He was about to die. The trident drowned towered over him as it gurgled another hideous noise. The monster raised its trident to finish the job when a sword flew through the air and sliced the monster's head off. The body of the creature fell to the floor as the other 2 drowned let out gurgles of confusion. Out of the woods, Grian and a parrot charged. With an iron sword in hand, Grian cut down one of the drowned, restraining Scar. The last of the monsters lunged at Grian and managed to tackle him to the ground. Grian quickly kicked it onto its back before he threw his sword through the air and into the head of the drowned. The drowned let out one last horrid gurgle as whatever force remained in it left its body. Grian held out his hand to Scar, who all too eagerly accepted it. "Do you have any food?" Scar asked weakly. "Here you go," Grian responded, handing Scar a few loaves of bread he had mugged off another villager. Scar hungrily munched down on the bread, his body rapidly metabolizing the food, healing over his wounds instantly, not even leaving a scar. "Phew, that was close," Scar said. "I didn't think they left the water." "Neither did I." "Weird," responded Grian. "What do you think of this place?" Grian looked around at the lake before him, the moon starting to reflect on the still and shallow water. "I quite like it," Grian said, his English accent showing. "Nice spot for a starter house." "I was thinking the same thing. I'm gonna build a magical snail named Larry with a mustache made out of diamond blocks." A normal man would call an ambulance should their best friend have said that sentence to them. However, this was Hermitcraft, and Green knew that none of them were normal.
He simply smiled at Scar and patted him on the shoulder.
You do you, buddy. You do you. Green and Scar took another moment to admire the moonlit lake as the pesky bird calmly sat on Green's shoulder. They had a lot of work to do, but this was not a new revelation for them. They were proud to be hermits, and they couldn't wait to see their friends again. Alright, everybody, that was the end of Chapter 1 of my Hermitcraft fanfic. Thank you all for listening. I know this is a little different from the usual animation content I do, but I had this big writing project. The whole thing is 151 pages on Google Docs, so, let me know if you want more. Of course, that opinion doesn't matter because I'm going to be posting more, because content. But yeah, I'm trying to get into more audio-based content, like audiobook, show reviews, so just let me know what you think, and I can't wait to see you all in 2 weeks. Have a good one, everyone.